Hey, I'm Carl Hood with Analog Way, and welcome to my office hours. So let's talk about config files or configuration files for the Aquilon. Now, the Aquilon, it's not a computer, it doesn't have RAM, it doesn't have undo or an undo history or anything like that, so it's effectively live all the time. If you ever want to save what you're doing in the Aquilon, you need to basically pull a configuration file. Similarly, if you ever want to go back to a state that you were in yesterday, an hour before, whenever, last year maybe, that's also going to be reliant on you loading a configuration file from that time. So let's take a look at how to save and then load configuration files in WebRCS. So in WebRCS, we want to click on this little icon for the Aquilon up here. When we click on that, we'll notice there's a Save, Reset, and Load button kind of near the bottom of this pop-up. Those will all go to the configuration page, but let's click on Save to start. So when we do that, we're brought here. We have all these checkboxes for what we're going to save into our configuration file, which, by the way, I would recommend leaving every single one of these checked. If you uncheck any of these, that will not be included in the configuration file, and then you'll never be able to load that into your Aquilon in the future. So leave all these checked. I promise you the files are not that big. You also have the option to save your config file to a number of different places. Local computer is the default. This will save your config to the default download location of the browser that you're using to talk to the Aquilon. But then you can also save to a couple of internal memory slots. Now, you'll notice I have a classroom default configuration saved to my unit here in the Academy, but I only do this because I rarely reset my Academy unit. I usually just recall this config. If you're working on a unit that is often reset, especially like if it's a live event unit, then any config that is saved here internally will get wiped with a factory reset. So I don't recommend typically saving to these internal slots unless you're working on an installed unit, but this local computer save will give you an actual file that you can stick on a thumb drive or on a hard drive or anywhere outside of the box. So let's go ahead and hit download so we can save a file here. What this is going to do is package up my configuration, everything including my input, output parameters, libraries, so like my image libraries, my edit libraries, all that stuff is going to be packaged into a configuration file and then saved to, I believe, just the downloads folder. So you can see here that I've got a file for my config. It's AQL for Aquilon config, and then the serial number of my unit, and then date and time that it was saved. And it's also a .awc file type, stands for analog way configuration. That's what we're looking for. Now, to use this, or to load it to my Aquilon, I want to go to the load page. Here, I can go find my file in the downloads. There it is. And I can hit open. When I hit open, it's going to kind of parse that all out and basically prompt me to load this configuration file to my Aquilon. Once it's done kind of cracking it open here, we'll get, as you might notice, all the same checkboxes that we had on the save page. So this is where you can choose if you want to load the whole config, parts of the config. It's really up to you, right? You get to choose exactly what parts of your config, if not all of them, you want to load to the Aquilon. You also, for the image library specifically, have the option to merge the new and the old. You can do that by replacing images. You can do that by basically just adding all the new images to the old ones, or you can just completely wipe the existing library and replace it with this new library of images that is in this new configuration. And then when you hit apply, this is going to run the configuration load, and then your Aquilon will reboot after a couple minutes with this new, basically, configuration loaded to it. Now, the only thing that is not part of the configuration is the firmware version. So you'll notice up here, at the very top, the Aquilon does tell me what firmware version my configuration was saved with, but it doesn't mean that it's going to push this firmware update. So I can load configurations that were saved on different units, any model really of Aquilon, running any firmware, right? It really doesn't matter. Obviously, if you're loading a configuration from a super old firmware version to a super new firmware version, then you might have shows that weren't configured with the newest, latest, and greatest features, and vice versa. If you have a brand new config on the latest firmware, you load it to an Aquilon that's running an old firmware, then some of the latest and greatest features are just not going to be known by this Aquilon running older firmware. So there's that to take into consideration, but your firmware will not change when you load a new configuration file. So that's how you save and load configuration files to your Aquilon. Be sure to check out my other office hours videos for more tips and tricks. And of course, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.